Very warm welcome to the program The Mid-Morning Pack right here on your favorite channel, MBCI TV. And thank you so much for finding time to be with us. This is a program that looks at matters, current affairs, and we also bring you a panel to be able to look at some of these particular issues and try to make sense of what is also happening in the country. And today, we've prepared for you 3 subjects that we want to look in details. We'll look at the appointment and the vetting of CSs and also the principal secretaries or the PSs. Then we also look at the issue of graft and public wastage, and also look at the issue concerning parliament independence. Thank you so much. You can join us by giving us your feedback. I'll be giving you the platform where you can interact with us in today's show. But for now, let me bring to you our panel today. And right here on this particular set, I'm being joined by Mwalimu Michael Gasho. He's a leadership and governance consultant. Karibu sana, and thank you so much for having us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, and I'm also having Bwana Cornelius Oduor. He's also a governance and also a policy expert. Karibu sana Bwana Oduor, and thank you so much for making time to be with us on the site.
Thank you for having me.
Karibu sana. And our viewer, you can join us and you can interact with us in our platform, in our SMS platform, that is 23814, and also on our WhatsApp platform, that is 0721 105 105. And also catch us on our social media pages, that is Facebook and YouTube. On Facebook, that is MBCI TV, and again on YouTube, that is MBCI TV Official. The question that we are asking you is, what qualities should be looked into during the vetting of the CSs and the PSs? What qualities do you think should be looked into during the vetting during the vetting of the cabinet secretaries and also the principal secretaries? And as we continue with the show, we'll be glad to sample some of your feedback as far as this particular discussion is concerned. Karibuni sana. Just starting with you, Mwalimu, so much has happened in the course of this week and also last week. But we saw the list that was actually brought out, the list of the principal secretaries. They are the ones that are now supposed to come and also fill the spaces that was there during the era of Uhuru Kenyatta. What do you think about that particular, the short list that came out?
Well, one of the things that people must be able to know is that all those for the principal secretaries, they applied. Mm-hmm. That's an application.
Yes.
And then, of course, they were shortlisted. Mm-hmm. And when they are shortlisted, it means, therefore, that they meet the quality of the people who are needed for that. Mm-hmm. But shortlisting is not the final thing. There is also the vetting.
Yes.
So once they are vetted, again, we'll be able to know whether they fit to be in those offices or not.
Wow.
But one of the things that comes out very clear is that the vast majority of them are people with experience in issues of leadership in governance or in government, either as politicians, because we have even politicians there, or people who have been in the public service. Okay. So yes, that to me, it's a beginning.
It's a beginning. Yeah. But Oduor, what do you think about the list of those who are shortlisted? And you can remember initially, I think they were around 400, and then there was the revised list, which now brought up to around 500 plus.
I must say that's generally good, looking at the fact that this is a process that is being managed by the Public Service Commission.
Yeah.
And principal secretaries, as they were, at the highest level position in public service, because they just work. They're the technical lead in the national government departments. So it's expected that for one to have made it in the shortlist, they must be meeting the basic minimum criteria in terms of academic qualification, experience, to handle such a docket, because you are leading a whole department and you're supposed to provide technical backup in terms of policy implementation in the State Department. So I think what is critical is the next process of interviews that will be conducted by the Public Service Commission to ascertain that what they saw in the applications actually obtains in the true character of the people who will attend the interviews. I think it's a good beginning, and how the process will be conducted generally then should enable us to arrive at the most competent and experienced personalities to occupy these positions. Yeah.
And looking even at the number, more than 9,000 Kenyans applied for these particular positions, bearing in mind that maybe just paltry 50 that will actually be successful for these particular positions. What do you make of that?
It tells you that this position is very attractive in terms of the perks and the kind of reward. I think be appointed a permanent secretary, you will be enjoying a gross salary of close to 1 million Kenya shillings. Okay. And this then becomes one of the top rank paying positions in the country. So I think because of what we are seeing in the private sector and in other sectors, then this position becomes very attractive for anybody who wants to increase or to grow in terms of career, as well as also to improve their pay pack, because I think is almost the highest pay grade in the public civil service.
Okay. And one of the other issues, Mwalimu, that brought a lot of reactions and mixed feelings is the issue of those who had lost in the elections, be it in the parliamentary, in the maybe governor, or even in the Senate races, but their names have now been found in that particular shortlisted list. What do you think of that? There are those who maybe think that now the time of now be rewarding those maybe who lost in the political seats has now come.
There are quite a number of issues there that arise there. But number one, we must be able to recognize that all those people who contested for positions of leadership were people who are looking forward to serving. From where I sit, there are people who are looking forward to serving the public in one form or the other. And they did not probably fail to get elected, probably not because they were worse off than the person who was elected. But there is a possibility that they were not elected because they were not in the right party. And even though they may have been in the right party, probably there was somebody who was better than them in the eyes of the public. And therefore, from my position, I think it shouldn't hinder any person who has contested for a seat should not be hindered by simply because you failed. You failed to reach the seat, and therefore you should not be considered unless this person, because there is a criteria, and the criteria is set in the Constitution, and nowhere does it say that if at all you have failed to achieve. After all, even some of the people who are standing, they themselves could have failed in several other things, including business, or they could have failed in one way or the other. But so long as that person meets the qualification sets in Chapter 6 of the Constitution, I don't think there is anything to hinder that particular person. Of course, people have a look at it as like this one here is a political reject. They use the word political reject. But I don't think it is being rejected. As long as we are looking at it as being rejected, that is why we have that. But I think to me it is a failure. And people who fail forward, you learn from your failures, and therefore you move on. Some of these people, look at in the past we could even have looked at some of the presidential candidates like the late Mwai Kibaki as a political reject. He tried the presidency and failed, but when eventually he became the president, he delivered. So being a principal secretary or being a cabinet secretary is a public office. And therefore, if some of these people who have been given those positions, they have actually proved worth the call. And that is why I don't think we should look at it like that.
What's your take, Bwana Oduor? Because there are those who maybe think that there's so many other Kenyans who would have qualified for those positions, but then just because maybe somebody was supporting the government that is in place, even though they themselves lost in that particular election, that is one of the major considerations that has been made for them maybe to have been put in that particular, or to their names to have appeared in the shortlist.
I have a different opinion, because if it was the position of the cabinet secretary, fine, these are political appointment. But for the position of the principal secretary, this is a public servant, and I think if you go with the principles of public service, we are supposed to exercise political neutrality. To the extent that some of the candidates might have been very active in the recent elections, portrays some kind of imbalance in terms of their view on issues, and they might inject some, politicize the public service. And that's why, for one to have been very active in political processes, like just like in the recent elections, might not be a very good starting point for one who wants to serve in the because they already have, their eyes are already trained on political processes, and public service does not require a lot of political mechanization to run. So because you're going to lead technocrats.
So you're saying the PSS should be more of technocrats than politicians, as maybe opposed to CSS?
Yes, surely, because for CS, they're just there for policy pronouncement and advising the president who appoints them. But for public principal secretaries, they are working directly with the public servants, the directors, technical people in the departments, and therefore what is required there is technical backup, capacity to administratively manage the departments, as opposed to a political clout. Because if you are in this office today and you are planning to run for a political office in the next 5 years, chances are that midstream, maybe around 2025, 26, this person might not be concentrating to do the work, because they would have moved one step towards organizing themselves for the next political battle in 2027. And that's why, for proper transition in government, and it's usually required that at the level of the PS, these are people who can serve between the two administration without having a political interest.
And I know Mwalimu Gachagua wants to chip in on that, but just before I come to him, I remember the last time we had the discussion here, Bwana Oduor, you said that the Constitution requires that all Kenyans are served in fairness, but the Deputy President is on record saying that the Kenya Kwanza, those who supported, will be the ones to be given the first priority before maybe the others who did not support the government are considered. What do you think of that pronouncement in regards even to those maybe who will qualify for this particular position?
I think from a constitutional point of view that is wrong, because elections, a democratic process, is the one that allows us to make a choice. Once you've been elected as a president, you are a president for the people of Kenya, not Kenya Kwanza supporters. So you have been elected to serve the Kenyan public, and therefore there shouldn't be a criteria that gives priority or preference to people who are sympathetic to the political party that form the government. I think that is going to give us a very bad starting point in terms of equity and fairness, because then if we say that priority will be given to those who are sympathetic to the Kenya Kwanza coalition, then it means that there will be no fairness in terms of allocating positions, public appointments across the political divide, the face of Kenya geographically in terms of the regions, looking at issues of the gender balance and many other things, minorities included. So I think the guiding principle should be the national values as captured in Article 10 of the Constitution, that ensures that there is a balance between the political divide, there's balance between the genders, there's balance in the geographic spread of where these people come from. So I think from where I stand, constitutionally and going by the national values and principle of governance, that would be a very bad starting point.
Also, take Mwalimu, do you think this...
I agree with my brother on certain issues. But at the same time, I think the drafters of our constitution, either they miss something or maybe the spirit behind it, the spirit behind the constitution could be different from what we are seeing. First and foremost, we envisage a situation whereby a civil servant is actually not partisan, and the principal secretary is, in such a position, should not be partisan. Okay. But at the same time, they are political, in the sense that even when the policy comes from the cabinet secretaries bring the policy. The person who implements that is the principal secretary, together with the rest of the civil servants in that particular department or ministry. And therefore, that is why I think the drafters of our constitution left that the person who is actually implementing the policies is also a political appointee.
Right.
And as long as that person is a political appointee, it's not somebody who has grown through the ranks to the position of cabinet secretary. Even saying that they will not be partisan in any way is actually a myth. They will definitely be, because they will play a certain level of allegiance to the appointing authority. And that is why personally I believe that as long as we give the cabinet, the president and the public service, the appointment, the power to appoint these people, there will always be something that, political. And at the end of the day, there is nobody who is apolitical. Even those who are in much lower ranks, they are not apolitical. They are persuaded in one way or the other. But when it comes to serving Mwananchi, you don't serve this one because he is now from this particular political persuasion or this leaning, and you serve him better than this other one. I believe that the policies that are made even by the cabinet secretaries are policies that are supposed to take the country forward. And therefore, their implementation, in my view, it doesn't matter whether they are political, politicians, or anything like that. As to what he said, that 5 years down the line, or a few years down the line, they may also be interested in contesting, and therefore they don't play full allegiance. I believe that is why we need to bring some political decency in our country, such that if at all you're interested in taking a certain particular position, instead of saying 3 months to the elections, I think the requirement should be that we should actually extend it. At least 1 year or 2 years before, you should have resigned, so that you can now serve your political interest and pursue your political interest. But we have had even civil servants from across, or public servants from across the divide, waiting until, from teachers to people in the county governments and so on, waiting until like this year, it was up to February. They were required to resign in February. February now, when you look at February and the elections are in August, this is 6 months. That means, therefore, there is a possibility, even according to how the law is, there is a possibility that that person could have actually been working even for 2 years to go to the position which he went for. And therefore, to me, whether they are politicians or not, I think the key thing is performance.
The key thing is performance. Bonador, what about the issue of, because we've seen some of the PSs that had actually been in the last regime, Uhuru's regime, some of them we've also seen their names in the list of those that have been shortlisted. What's your take maybe on the blending maybe of those who have already served as PSs in the previous government, maybe joined or maybe combined with those that will now actually come to serve in the new government?
Yeah, it's not a crime for one to have served in a previous administration. At that level, I think what is important here is the ability to deliver. This government talks about a plan, and a plan that seeks to give us economic liberation. And there are short-term targets, there are medium-term targets, there are long-term targets. And therefore, what the president requires is people with the capacity to read into the manifesto of the current administration and to lay strategies of delivering. So if you are looking for that, that might not only be resident in people who are sympathetic to the Kenya Kwanza administration. There could be very good minds outside the political cycle of Kenya Kwanza, and I therefore feel that even those who have served in the Uhuru government have a right, an equal right, to vie for this position. And if they are found to have what it takes to drive the agenda of the various state departments, so be it. And I don't see any problem in one seeking to extend their stay in government through competitive process.
If anything,
yes,
even quite a good number of politicians, including His Excellency the President, served in the Uhuru regime. He was the deputy president.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is anything wrong with that. When you go to the West, for example, you find that in America, a Republican president is elected, but he knows that there is somebody so well versed in a certain area, but he, you know, in a society like that, they're very open. You are a civil servant, but they know you are leaning. So he picks a Democrat, or a Democrat, you know, somebody, a president from the Democratic Party, ends up picking a Republican whom he knows this person is going to deliver. Because the key thing at the end of the day is that to serve the common mwananchi.
Sure.
Yeah.
And one of the fears that is out there, Mwalimu Gachagua and also Bwana Odor, and I want us now to look into it because the vetting will start today, the interviews will start today, but there is the notion that those who are already, or those who are going to fill these particular positions, their names have already been decided. What do you make of this kind of allegations?
Of course, in this kind of process...
And from our history,
yeah, in this kind
have we
of process,
seen things like these ones?
There are always those tendencies for political manipulation and behind the scene lobbying for certain people to be appointed. As in any other political process, that
should it even have? Should there be behind the scene lobbying?
Of course, for political appointments, that naturally happens. Because of the feeling of people wanting to be rewarded for giving political support during campaigns. As even during the campaigns, the president himself did promise some of these people purportedly to represent their regions in his administration. Okay. The only thing that we need to look at is in the vetting process, especially with regard to the cabinet secretaries, is that the president has nominated cabinet secretaries. It's now the work of Parliament to vet, and Parliament has already set up a select committee made up of parliamentarians across the political divide. So the select committee will be getting information from the public and other stakeholders concerning the various nominees. So this is a time that if you have something against a particular candidate and you feel that they're not fit to hold public office, this is the time to raise it, so that it can be used and the weight of that evidence can be looked at and see if they are really fit to hold public office, because they are holding this office in public trust, and therefore they must meet the threshold for holding public office. So if you look at Chapter 6 of the Constitution, there are various standards that one ought to meet to be able to qualify, because for you to earn public trust, because you're holding this office in trust for the public, there are certain things that we must be sure about you. And I think this the issue of looking at one's track record, whether they have come in coalition with the law, if there are pending court cases, if there are serious allegations about their personal conduct, if really they meet the capacity in terms of experience and academic qualification to be able to run a department at the level of the cabinet secretary. I think those issues then become very critical. But ultimately, I know for sure that being in a political process, other political considerations might become very important in choosing, because now it will depend on the ability of the ruling coalition or party to marshal enough number of members of parliament to approve the cabinet list of appointment. So I think it's a mix of both political lobbying and also looking at the individual character and capability of the nominees.
So at this particular stage, Mwalimu, even as you chip in that particular line, what are some of these factors, like what he's talking about, the issue of Chapter 6, because those who have already been selected, those who have already found themselves in the shortlisted, among the shortlisted candidates, some of them have issues as far as matters of integrity is concerned. So when the vetting will be taking place, are we really going to see maybe some of these key issues, matters of integrity, the track record really being an issue to determine who is going to take what position?
Definitely they'll be brought out. Some people even, during the vetting process in the past, we have had some things being brought up. But in Kenya, we are yet to have somebody either stepping down and saying, no, I thank you so much for having faith in me, but because I have an unresolved issue, an issue that I have not brought to a logical conclusion, then let me wait until it's dispensed with. But at the same time, we are yet to find a situation, either, especially at the national level, whereby so many issues come up, and then that person is rejected on the basis of the things that are still there. Now, I was reading a paper by Professor David Minja of Kenyatta University, talking on the issues of corruption, and he says that it looks like even the law itself is made in such a way that, or it has been crafted in such a way that such people can always get away with it. Why? Because even when it came to the elections, you realize that when it came to vetting, as long as you have say, for example, you've been found guilty by a lower court, but as long as you appeal and the appeal has not been dispensed with, then there is nothing to stop you. So these people, they will simply go to to court, or they will go to the vetting committee and say this issue, if they have been found guilty by a lower court, they say I have an appeal that is ongoing, and therefore that does not in itself prevent them from actually being appointed. But I think in a place where we have decency in politics, as long as you have a pending court case, I personally feel that that person should simply step aside. And that does not mean that you are saying you are guilty. You are saying that there is, because as my brother Odwol said, this is an office that requires public trust. And as long as...
So that should be personal responsibility.
Yes, it should be a personal responsibility, as much as also it is a legal responsibility. But I think it should start with the person. We have people who have been nominated, and those people who have been nominated have serious cases ongoing. Serious cases. I looked at even the parliamentary committee, the business committee that was appointed the other day, or was approved yesterday. And I was looking at a case whereby an MP has a serious case of murder ongoing, but now is a member of that committee. So some of these people seems to be going to those places to protect themselves from that. And you realize that all of a sudden, after the new government has taken place, several cases have simply vetoed out. Others are no longer contesting those cases simply because of that political protection. But I think, in my view, it's a cause for decency. As long as I'm being mentioned in a certain scandal, then, or in a certain crime, why don't I ask that it is be dispensed with as fast as possible, is very expeditiously, so that I can actually now stand there with all confidence, knowing that all those things are behind me. So to me, I don't think we have yet reached a point where there is political decency in this country, unfortunately.
And I think it's also a moral question. It's a moral issue, because if I'm appointed and I have pending court cases that cast doubt on my individual social standing in the community, I think the honorable thing is not to seek for this public appointment position, because you don't inspire confidence in holding that office. You'll be distracted by these court cases.
So what does it tell about those particular leaders who really know, like Mwalimu has even been pointed, one that has already a murder case, but they are finding themselves in
I think there's an issue of impunity in this country and lack of respect for the rule of law. because at an individual level, you should be able to see that I'm not going to inspire public confidence if I continue in this, serving in this position. And such cases, if institutions of governance cannot stop these characters, then it behoves the public to also challenge some of these appointments in court. It doesn't stop us from challenging an individual's appointment to a state office if we feel that they don't meet the threshold for Chapter 6. And I think that's a process that we can challenge individually and even as institutions of governance.
In fact, if you look at some of the countries in the West, I remember sometimes back a vehicle having an accident in Brazil and killing, I think, 40 people. And the then Minister for Transport actually resigned. He was not the driver. He was not the mechanic who repaired the vehicle. But he simply says that I cannot preside over a ministry when this is happening. That is the kind of decency we are calling upon. When you look at the Prime Minister of Britain, sometimes back when there was Brexit, and people voted against it. They were not voting against him. They were voting to come out of the European Union. And as soon as they voted like that, because he was of a contrary opinion, he himself was for remaining in the European Union. He simply resigned. It is not because he did anything, but simply decency. That's why we call him for political decency. Political decency. Yes, because some of these people, as long as you have, I think a murder case, in my view, is a very serious issue. Yes. When it comes to, and it is being tried to be sanitized by some people, some quarters saying these cases were placed on them as political persecution. Maybe it could be true that it was political persecution. But as long as it is pending in the courts of law, we must also know that the politics and our judiciary are two separate parts of government. And as long as we have confidence in our judiciary, why don't we allow the judicial process to come to an end, to a logical conclusion, and then this person will be proved that he's innocent or she is innocent, and then they can be appointed. And
interestingly, talking about allowing the judicial process to continue, and there has been also mixed public feelings of late, whereby we've seen those maybe had been implicated in a number of scandals, in a number of issues. Their cases have just abruptly been dropped, and others maybe who seem maybe not to have favored the government, now their cases seems now to come to be haunting them. What does it tell?
It's a perception issue. We leave it to the judiciary because we vest the judicial authority to the courts. And it's within the province of the courts to decide whether a case should go on. Maybe the timing is what was wrong, and there's this feeling that because of now this new administration, those who are seen to be sympathetic have their cases being dropped, and those who are on the opposing side, their cases have been brought back to court. But what I feel, in a proper functioning democracy, that decision should be assessed on the basis of the strength of evidence and material evidence or witnesses that are presented before a court of law. So if in the province, in the wisdom of the judiciary, some of these cases did not merit to move on, so be it. But it will be very unfortunate if there is any kind of political interference on judicial authority.
So can it just be a coincidence that when their names maybe have been forwarded for the vetting maybe of that particular position of PS, position of CS, and then you also have that particular time that now someone had this particular case, and all of a sudden that case is no longer there?
There are several ways in which there could be manipulation, but several ways in which it could have been. You realize that some of these cases were civil cases, and the person who is prosecuting or the applicant goes and withdraws that. Whether that person has been induced to do that or otherwise, you can never be able to prove. And therefore, especially for issues to do with the civil cases, or even whereby the complainant, somebody was complaining, but others, But there could be others.
Okay.
There could still be others where the situation is that the person who is being prosecuted, actually the ruling simply by coincidence came around this time. And allow us to mention a case.
Yes, yes.
That one of Mithika Linturi. And
the complainant.
The wife, quote unquote, Keitan. Now, it happened that Linturi was actually married. People needed to know also the law, especially when it comes to issues of marriage. Yes. The Marriage Act, I think 2014 or something like that, it's in such a way that if you are married either a Christian marriage or a civil marriage, that marriage is until maybe there is legal, divorce. That marriage, as long as there is no divorce, is still subsisting. And those marriages are supposed to be, they are supposed to be monogamous. Okay. Now, when that was happening, he went and they say, in Kalenjin, what they say, he went for Goito. He went and took the bride price across the other side. Now, that is not recognized under the law. And that is what the court said. The court said that he couldn't have been married customarily as long as the other marriage was actually subsisting. And in that case, therefore, that they said Keitan was never married to, again, you see, under the current law, even customary marriages are supposed to be registered with the registrar of marriage. Yeah. So that one was an unregistered marriage. And if it was an unregistered marriage, then it really was actually, people may lead politics into it, but it's actually purely legal issues. So
it's purely legal issues.
I think, well, there could be politics in it, but I don't think the court was actually controlled by politics.
Wow.
So that's why we're saying, I think, in my view, we shouldn't read too much into that.
Great, great, great. Remember, you're still joining us on the Mid-Morning Pack, your mid-morning show every Wednesday right here on your most favorite channel, MVCI TV. And on set, I'm having Mwalimu Michael Gashoi. He's a leadership and governance consultant, and also Bwana Cornelius Odur is also a governance and public policy expert. We want to look at another subject, and the president said that we're going to have what we call budget cuts, and looking at a figure of 300 billion just to try and ensure that we fix this particular economy. Bwana Odur, is it a step in the right direction?
Sure, I think the president is trying to meet some of his election promises by cutting down on what I consider non-essential.
And remember, today is, I think, 30 days in government.
In government.
And some Kenyans are saying there is too little to show.
Of course, that's a short period for any person.
We still give them some 2 more months?
Any significant impact. Because some of these things require a new policy shift or a new policy direction, and for you to feel the impact of those pronouncements, it will take quite some time. Okay. I think the president is right to some extent that we've been running, we've been living beyond our means, to say the truth, is that we can't have a budget where almost 70% of it is going to be financed through borrowing. And it means, therefore, that we are putting a lot of pressure on the exchequer or the public to try and meet the demands for this budget. So borrowing itself is not a bad thing, but there's a particular level where it reaches no longer sustainable. And I think it's in the wisdom of the Kenya Kwanza administration, as a first short-term measure, is to reduce this budget by such an amount so that we are able to deal with the budget, what we call the budget deficit. That is the relationship between what the cost of the budget and what we can internally generate as a country to finance that budget. Okay. So it means whatever we are not able to raise through revenue must be borrowed, either internally or externally. And that has a bearing on economic performance of this country. So I think as a short-term measure, it's in the wisdom of this administration that we reduce this budget as part of austerity measures, just to caution the Kenyan public from this expensive borrowing, especially from...
And maybe one of the questions that people will be asking Mwalimu, when we have a step like this one, when you have an action like this one, who's going to be affected?
I believe that we can be able,
ways?
I believe that we can be able to have budget cuts without necessarily affecting any project in government, or maybe affecting so many people. In the sense that if we were to cut down on the costs of running government, in the sense that there are so many seminars where people are forever going, there are so many foreign trips,
benchmarking trips.
Benchmarking seminars, holding meetings in hotels while we have facilities, government facilities,
most of which have had
like you find members of a county assembly, instead of going to using the county assembly, which is actually comfortable enough to discuss, and they have even offices there and boardrooms.
Yes.
Instead of sitting there, they'll travel, not even within the county. Like here in Nakuru, they move from Nakuru to go to Mombasa, to go to White Sands Hotel. And you hear that they have used 500 million onwards. I believe that if we were to keep on cutting down on such things, we will be able to, it is not very, very hard to cut that budget by that 300 billion. But so long as that 300 billion does not, it's only affecting the recurrent expenditure, not development expenditure. Because again, we know that development also expands the revenue base. And that is why I would believe that it is possible. Personally, I believe it is possible to run to have that budget cut without affecting too many programs, government programs.
Okay.
If we targeted the right things, yes.
If we targeted the right things. Bonodo, do you agree that maybe some of these the budget cuts will actually try as much as possible to help maybe what we can call so much of public wastage?
To some extent, it will help, because sometimes we allocate resources to non-essential programs in government. Actually, we can do without them. Like when you look at the recent analysis, if you look at the financial year 2020-2021, you'll see that the Parliamentary Service Commission, the Executive Office of the President, spent quite a huge amount of money in foreign travels. And in this era of technology, people can actually have meetings online and make successful decisions, bilateral decisions between countries. So if we can cut down on the non-essential expenses, we are still able to deliver services at a bare minimum cost. And I think this is where the current administration needs to look at. In every department, there are things that can be done at relatively lower cost without necessarily interfering with the general service delivery. 300,000 in 300 billion in one financial year is quite a huge amount. And I know there are some certain development projects that will have to shelve because if they are not non-priority development projects, they can wait. And that will have a bearing in terms of the amount of expenditure that we are going to have public expenditure. And of course, that has a bearing on the performance of the economy because when government spends, private sector thrives because they are the main suppliers of services and goods and services to government. So you'll have also a negative impact on the general performance of the economy. But if it's done, it's rationalized properly, I think we can still run a budget less by 300 billion, but still meet the basic requirements in terms of public service delivery.
And there is a contradiction. There is a contradiction when we are talking about cutting down on expenditure. But the president also promised the senators that there will be some money for them so that they can be able to carry out their accountability responsibility. Yes. I think that to me is increasing the budget without necessarily something adding value to it. Okay. Because of course it was coming as a clamor because of the clamor by the senators, because when you look at the MPs, the MCAs, they have the ward fund.
The ward fund, yeah.
When you come to the MPs, there is a CDF, National Government CDF. Now, when it comes to women rep, there is something that we call equalization fund.
Okay.
So in the political class, the only people who seem to be left out are the senators. But in my view, I think the current constitution, and that is something that people have actually seems not to have understood. In the current constitution, even these issues of saying that we are in Kenya Kwanza or we are in Azimio and therefore we are opposition, we are government and so on, this is a presidential system. We are in a presidential system. And the presidential system is such a way that parliament should be completely independent of the executive. Right. And therefore, parliament has the responsibility to check on the executive. And therefore, I don't think it is right for the executive seems to seemingly trying to meet the ego needs of some people, politicians somewhere, so that you have probably the favorable rulings in parliament or decisions in parliament. I think, to me, or in the Senate for that matter, if we are having austerity measures, can we have them across the board? Let's not, we cannot be at one time be promising that we're going to have a budget cut, but at the same time we are also bringing in another budget, and I don't know whether it will be there in the supplementary budget. We are bringing in something else that will scoop quite some amount of money. I think we need to be honest with ourselves as a country, and the leadership also, and we ensure that the things that are being done, they are being done across the board. Very
right there. When Odore, as you chip in on that, and Mwalimu has talked about looking at parliament and playing its role very critically as far as checking the executive is concerned, because there are those who really think that we do not have an independent parliament. There are those maybe who are even questioning the latest ruling that was done by the Speaker. You will chip in on that maybe later on in this particular show. But when you're talking about this budget cut, do you think it should also touch on some of our state officers, some of our public officers, who so many people think maybe they are getting very high salaries?
Yeah, I think one of the areas where the current administration should look at is salary cut. And I think the SRC has been very clear that we are living beyond our means in terms of the kind of salaries that we were apportioned or allocated to some of the state officers. And I think a recent review of the allowances by members of parliament was a move in the right direction, though it has been fought seriously by parliament in their first sitting. SRC has done a rationalization and found out that members of parliament don't deserve an allowance for every assignment that are given in parliament. Remember, they have a salary, and therefore it doesn't make sense to pay people sitting allowance to attend parliament for the very, very duties that they were elected to do. And I think even the recent Supreme Court ruling on the CDF is also move in the right direction, because I think through CDF and other funds that are run by political appointees, women rep, MPs, and the MCS, should be abolished, because there's a lot of overlap in the functions or the kind of programs that are being funded by CDF vis-a-vis what should ordinarily be undertaken by county government. So when you're looking at proper budget cuts, it should look at also the structural overlaps in terms of how we manage operations of government, so that there's a clear dichotomy between the functions of the national government and the functions of the county government. I believe there are still a lot of resources that are allocated to parastatals that are within the national state departments that ordinarily should be functions that should be transferred to county government. That will have a bearing in terms of the cost of offering those services, so that those services are properly channeled through county governments, and then we are able to cut down on the operating cost of running these loss-making parastatals. And that really will help in the long term in terms of cutting down unnecessary operational costs.
But Mwalimu, it is not the first time that Parliament is interfering with the roles of these independent bodies like SRC, and so many Kenyans feel very disappointed because they look at the MPs and the elected leaders as people just who want maybe to look after their own selfish interests. when it comes to matters like maybe taking salary cuts?
Of course, one of the things that we must be able to know is that there has been a lot of selfishness on the part of the leaders in this country, not only members of parliament. And I also want to say it is not the first time that we are having austerity measures. You remember sometimes back when the Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta was the Minister for Finance, and he ordered that even the so-called gas guzzlers, the vehicles, these vehicles with the whatever, and he ordered quite a number of Passats, Volkswagen Passats, and that were supposed to be the in thing when it comes to government transport of officers. But along the way, we forgot about that, and it's not. But basically, we are saying there are so many areas which we can have budget cuts, including, in fact, it is simply to look at those budgets and why do you need to transport people to the transport or even entertainment allowance in some of those offices are actually allowances that can bring a lot of development in a ward, or can be able to sink several boreholes in the semi-arid areas. But we are not, we've not been focused. There is a lot of selfishness that comes in. The SRC, it happens that, you remember the former leader of the SRC, what happened is that if you don't go according to the issues of parliament, when it comes to, they cut down your budget. You cut their budget, they cut down your budget. So they make you unable to operate. Yes. Yet the budget of the SRC.
They go on revenge mission.
Yes. So now when you realize that, they just kind of give in so that your budget also remains. But if at all we have people who are very focused on what we want in this country, there are so many. In fact, to me, I agree with my brother that 300 billion in a financial year is not something small. It's something huge. But I still believe it is something that is doable. Okay. So that we can be able to cut the budget deficit from the current is 900 billion to now 600. That's the intention. So that the borrowing is only for the 600. But I believe that in future we should be able to have a budget where over 90% of it is actually financed from what we generate. Okay. In terms of revenue. One other thing to tackle that, it's not actually to also just cut down on the budget, but we need to expand the revenue base. We need to expand the people who are paying taxes in this country. Because right now, it is the people who are in the formal sector, you and me and whoever else, who is employed or is earning directly from a salaried kind of whatever. They are the ones who are paying. But there are people who are doing some do I call them odd things there? And they're making much more money than even those who are unemployed. Right. But when it comes to payment of taxes, we don't have much of that them doing that. We need to expand the revenue base.
And Bwana Oduor, even in as much as this is a step in the right direction, but there are those who also argue that the baggage, the burden that you already have of financing maybe the loans that the previous government had already taken, maybe from countries like China, is already an uphill task, even maybe for this particular government. Is there a way in which something like this can be renegotiated?
Of course, any loan can be renegotiated. Of course, with the it will bring higher cost of interest because you are extending the period of payment, and therefore it also brings additional cost of servicing those loans. I think that there wasn't much problem with the investments that we got from our partners, the China and the rest. The only problem is that something like SGR, that now is going to be a huge burden on the Kenyan economy. Its rate of returns, turnover has been a bit low.
Very minimal.
Yeah, very minimal. By now, it should have been a functioning rail system from Mombasa to Malaba. The fact that this investment did not reach its desired destination is a big economic letdown, because then it's not able to trigger the economic development that was envisaged to expand the economy in a way that we will be able to pay this loan easily. So that delay in return from this investment is what is going to be a difficult thing to manage. Because when the loans are due and you're supposed to be paying, and you see now there is a decision even to shift issues of management of these what we are calling the Naivasha, the dry port, taking it back to Mombasa. That has a bearing in terms of the capacity of SGR to generate enough income even to contribute to servicing that loan. So there are a number of things that needs to be looked at, including probably going back to our donors and lenders to renegotiate, to give this economy a breather and a space to be able to come back and possibly pay these loans at appropriate time. Yeah.
Wow. As we draw to the conclusion of today's show, the subject of parliament independence, and Mwalimu, you had touched on parliament playing its role effectively as far as checking the executive is concerned, but there is fear that because we already have a speaker of both houses that were elected with the sides that actually are majority in this particular case, talking about Kenya Kwanza, there is fear that they might not really look at the aspect of independence as far as maybe the issues that are supposed maybe to be looked into, maybe the bills and so much of that. What's your take on this?
I said earlier, I personally don't see the reason why Parliament should at all times agree with the executive. They should actually agree. In fact, even when they are taking the oath, they take the oath to uphold the Constitution and to serve the people of Kenya. Unlike the previous regime where they were pledging allegiance to the president, the current schedule in our Constitution is they pay allegiance to the country, not to the presidency or to the president for that matter. And therefore, I think if the executive comes up with a bill or comes up with a policy that they feel that this is not going to serve our country well, then it behoves them to ensure that they reject that or amend it. But right now, as I think so far in Kenya, in the last now 12 years, since the promulgation of that constitution, I think we have had a lot of the MPs getting beholden to the State House. Whatever State House says, and I'm in this party, I go according to it. But one of the things that we should know is that Parliament should be completely independent of the executive. And therefore, they should look at those bills that are there, not based on agreeing with them just for the sake of pleasing somebody, the president or the presidency, but on pleasing the mwananchi.
And what is the place? What is the role of the speakers of the two houses, Bwana Odur, even as far as ensuring the independence of the legislature is concerned? There are those who have already accused the Speaker of the National Assembly in relation to the ruling that was done on maybe which side is the majority. How can they come as speakers who are independent? What are they supposed to do? Could there be some pressure that we elected you, we are the ones who formed the government, therefore you must toe the line and pass bills or make rulings that would really favor the government side?
Yeah, I think there's just a problem of interpretation of the Constitution because we run a presidential system. The president is elected directly by the people. That's direct democracy. Parliamentarians are our representatives. So we elect them directly to represent us. And the legislative authority vests in Parliament. To the extent that the Kenya Kwanza Coalition has had its way in terms of who becomes the Speaker of both the parliamentary houses, the Senate and the National Assembly, does not mean that the speakers, therefore, must always act to defend the current administration. That will be wrong because it will be a violation of the Constitution in terms of protecting the legislative authority of Parliament. So what we are saying is that Parliament, through its members, must be able to exercise its oversight responsibility. Whether you are in Kenya Kwanza or you are in Azimio, your role as a parliamentarian is to check on the executive. And checking on the executive is questioning some of the decisions of the executive. Sometimes you can reject them, sometimes they can approve them based on merit. But this myth that I am a Kenya Kwanza member of parliament, my work is to defend the administration, is a misnomer. I think is failing to appreciate your role as a member of parliament. Yes, you could be belonging to the ruling coalition, but your role as parliament is to check on the executive by checking on the policies that's brought in the House, by coming up with the legislation to support implementation of some of the policy decisions of the ruling coalition. So I think what we have here is some kind of misunderstanding, because people keep on referring to the opposition and those in government. The current setup does provide for parliament where we have only the minority side and the majority side. And all of them should play their oversight role, regardless of their political leaning to the executive. That way we'll be able to run this government within the tenets of the Constitution that provides for separation of powers, checks and balances between the three arms of government. The recent decision by the National Assembly Speaker to rule that Kenya Kwanza is the majority side is going to be contested by Azimio. They have already filed a petition, or they're going to file a petition in court. And I think that is the basis of rule of law. If they erred, if the speaker erred, then the courts will find out, because the court will interpret what constitutes a majority side and a minority side. And I think that's the kind of system that we want, that if parliament fails to abide by the rule of law, then the judiciary is there to check on it by giving us a proper constitutional interpretation of what majority side means and what minority sides mean. And I think that's what we expect, that the minority side will play its role in parliament in as far as oversight is concerned. And the majority side will also do that oversight, not necessarily only to defend the government's position, but to check and question some of the policy decisions made by the executive. Yeah.
That's very well, Mwalimu, and that is what many Kenyans would actually want to see, that even the minority side maybe should not just want maybe just to bring issues maybe which are not even pertinent, but maybe just because they want to criticize the government just for the sake of it. But both sides should actually play their roles effectively to ensure that Mwananchi at the end of the day actually benefits from the developments of the government.
I believe that when it comes to criticizing the government should not simply be for the sake of criticizing. It should be constructive criticism. Yeah. You should be able to offer an alternative. After all, you are the government in waiting. You should be able to offer an alternative and say this one here is not right. Like the court will definitely pronounce themselves in the case of the ruling by the Speaker of the National Assembly, but based on just on the face value of it, you realize that if these people signed a document and the document is still existing, in fact, to me, I think the most logical thing would have been, these people have defected, but since the 3 months are not yet over, after the whatever, then this is the majority side, a situation which will change in 3 months' time. So I don't know why the hurry. And 1 month is already over, so we are talking about 2 months. Yes. And if the Speaker would have actually ruled in that way, he would actually been seen he's actually creating or exercising the freedom of Parliament in itself. Okay. But now it looks like he's paying back. I was elected through Kenya Kwanza, and therefore Kenya Kwanza. And that is one, going back to our first topic, that brings us to the fact that the majority of those people, if not all, and I can, from where I sit, all those people who have been nominated, even if they go through Parliament, and the committees that are vetting them, bring their report in Parliament, the most likely thing is that they will be approved with, of course, dissenting voices, but they will definitely be approved by Parliament. Parliament is going to approve all those people. Take that to the bank. Why? Because people are looking at it instead of looking at is this person, because the reason why there is vetting of these people is to look at critically to the issues. Number one is, does this person have the capacity?
Yes.
You know, is he capable? Is he a technocrat in that area? Number two, does this person meet the tenets of chapter 6? Is he, in as far as chapter 6, that is the ethics and whatever it's concerned, is he or she meeting that? But I can tell you that Parliament will be used to sanitize. Even the people, because it seems as if Parliament has not yet understood their role. It will be used to sanitize.
You don't see any name being rejected?
I don't see any name being
Even
rejected.
a single one?
From where I sit, no. I don't see any.
Which will make the entire process just a waste of time when Odur.
Yeah, of course, that is the democracy. Majority will have their way, minorities will have their say. And it's unfortunate if Parliament can approve this list without raising fundamental issues. And I think it will go down in history. We need a Parliament can stand its feet and say this particular nominee is not fit for this position. That's how they earn their respect. But if they just use as voting machines to advance the interests of the executive, then it's very unfortunate, and it will be a letdown to the constitutional principle of separation of powers. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, but for me, from where I sit,
Yes,
all of them will go through. They will simply be sanitized. Actually, by the few decisions that have been made so far,
Yes.
you can be able to see how eager some members of Parliament are to vote along their party lines.
Yes.
And based on that now...
So in other words, you're saying the majority, those who are majority in Parliament, will basically approve those names.
They will,
we'll have the minority
dissenting in some of the names, but the dissent will not make much difference because the ruling is not by 2/3 majority in Parliament.
Simple
It's not
majority.
2/3, simple majority.
Simple majority.
And as long as it's simple majority, if the threshold would have been 2/3 majority, then I'm very sure even the appointing authorities or the nominating authorities would be very careful to look at these people are really going to go through Parliament. But as long as it is simple majority, my friend, personally I'm counting those people who have been nominated as already counted, the cabinet secretaries. Yeah, I don't foresee a situation where it will be different.
Quite interesting. We want to bring it to a close at this particular point. You've been watching the program, The Mid-Morning Pack, right here on MVCI TV, a program that comes to you every Wednesday, 10:30 to 12. We try to look at a number of issues that are of major significance, even as far as our country is concerned. And today, I've been having a very great panel to help us unpack some of the critical issues, some of the subjects making headlines in the country. That is Mwalimu Michael Gachoi, a governance and leadership consultant. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you today.
Thank you. It has been a pleasure being here.
Thank you so much. And also on board, we are having Bwana Cornelius Odur, CEO, Center for Enhancing Democracy and Governance, and also a policy and governance expert. Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution.
Thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much. And on behalf of the entire crew that has made today's program a success, we want to wish you a blessed day and enjoy the rest of your viewing. My name is Mangicho Mola.